The Jellison podcast is presented by Indy Lumberjack. They proudly offer reasonable rates, safe, top quality, courteous, efficient service. Let Indy Lumberjack help you reach your goal of maintaining beautiful and safe trees. They're by far the best in the business. You can get a free quote on indylumberjack.com or email indylumberjack@gmail.com for inquiries. Again, get a free quote on indylumberjack.com. What's up, everyone? We're back with another episode of the Jellison podcast, and today I have a very special guest, Olivia Harlan Dekker. Olivia, how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be on with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. So obviously you just got back from Turkey visiting your husband, Sam. How was that?
It's good. I've actually been able to go over about once a month, which is crazy, especially during COVID. But we've kind of kept finding these breaks in between my games and when he's in town. And then I'll go over even if it's for a couple days. It's really important for me to see him frequently. I think it's kind of better for both of our mental health to not be away from each other for too long. We both get a little stir crazy and lonely. So it's really good to be able to see each other as often as we can.
Yeah, 100%. So like you mentioned, how difficult is it to be away from him during his season and you're working, and how crazy is that?
Yeah, it's tough because some stretches are longer than others. And the toughest part really is the time zone change. So it's a 9-hour difference. So, when I'm just waking up and, before my feet even hit the floor, he's had most of his day go by. So there's so much to catch up. But times like I always tell him, I do not want to talk first thing in the morning. I need a cup of coffee. I need to go through my morning routine a bit. So that's almost harder than the distance is the time change because it's like you're living in two different worlds.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. So how are things different over there compared to here in the States? Obviously, we're in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah. It felt like things were so much more strict over here for a while, but in my last trip over there, Turkey has really shut things down. So now they have no dining in restaurants, only takeout, and they have a curfew on every night of the week. I think it's a little bit later on weekends, but not that there's anywhere to go anyways. But truly, they don't want people even on walks or outside or anything. So it'll be interesting. I'm going back over in a couple weeks, and I just keep my fingers crossed that things are going to be a little bit more lenient. Because last time I was there, there were a few times we left our apartment. But, for us, again, since we spend so much time apart, like those kind of mundane days of just cooking and watching Netflix and hanging out, that is the world to us. So we're a little bit more okay with that. But still, it's way more strict than the US right now.
Mm-hmm. And then going back to your career, how has it kind of affected you and your job? I know there really haven't been fans, maybe family at the Big Ten game. So how's that kind of impacted you?
Yeah, it's crazy. Usually for the last 6 years leading up to this season, I had a game every Saturday plus like 3 or 4 bowl games. So I was working like Labor Day weekend until um, really like first week of January. My last game last year was January 11th because some bowl games go that late.
Mm-hmm.
And this year I think this year I only had 6 football games total because I worked just a Big Ten schedule. And since they only had 8 regular season games and then ones would randomly get canceled that I'd be assigned to, like today, I was supposed to have a game and 3 of the 7 Big Ten games today were canceled. So, it's just so weird. My schedule's been so shriveled up, which is really sad. Again, it's led to more opportunities to go see my husband last minute when I'd have a canceled game. But it's felt like such a half. It has been a half season. Usually I work about 15 football games and I only had, I think, 6. So it's been a sad year. And I feel like every conference, and now that we're finally getting to conference championships, I feel like everyone's just like crawling to the finish line. Like the fact on the final day of the Big Ten, only about half of the games were played is so sad. This is not how anyone pictured it.
Yeah, it's tough. I was lucky enough to cover the Big Ten Oakland game for basketball, their home opener, and it was super weird with no fans. So what is that like when there's a huge play? Obviously, in the Big Ten, football's huge, so usually there's a bunch of crowd noise and all that stuff. So what has it been like actually attending the games?
I've got to admit, since I have two earpieces in every game anyways, it hasn't been that much more different for me because what I'm hearing is the TV feed.
Hmm.
Obviously, the TV feed picks up crowd noise though, so I mean, the atmosphere is like dead, but also like my tunnel vision and my periphery, I'm like all field, and even from there, I'm more watching like the bench and like listening into the huddles and the bench than I am even watching the game sometimes. Because if an injury is going on, if a fight's breaking out between a coach and a player and player, like I need to be catching that instead
Yeah.
of like the guys in the booth, they can document what's happening in the game. I'm trying to kind of make sure we've got a pulse on what's going on around it. So it's been weird, but I think it's been more different for the players than it has been for the media covering it.
Hmm. How do you think that these times of COVID will affect the industry of like sports media, both as we go through this pandemic and then finally when we're able to move past it and get better?
I think this will change things forever because for the last, let's say, 10 years, probably more, these media conglomerates, the NBCs, ESPNs, Fox, they've been trying to find ways to save money on game coverage especially, but their coverage in general. So in the last couple of years, ESPN has been doing games remotely. So they'll have the producer and director in Bristol, Connecticut, and then they'll have the talent on site. I've only been a part of one season of that, but it is very different. So you have your production meetings over what was, I think, Skype. It was like before Zoom a couple years ago. Now Zoom is almost a verb. It's like,
Yeah.
and so that was already a direction that the industry was trending towards. But now that every game is basically done that way, every meeting with coaches and with talent and production, it's all happening over Zoom. So I think now people realize what a time saver it is, and that the days of flying in for a Saturday game, I would fly in on a Thursday, get in Thursday night. We'd meet with both coaches and coordinators and usually one star player in person Friday at their hotel. And then game Saturday, production meeting Saturday morning, all in person with a big breakfast. And so like now I think they're realizing, oh, we don't have to pay for the big breakfast and we don't have to pay for everyone to be there an extra night early. Now we just do all our meetings over Zoom. We get in Friday night, call the game Saturday, and go home Saturday night. So it's in general, the industry with this model has saved so much money. So I'm curious what that's going to look like in the future once they know that this can work. I don't know if it's the best for chemistry or camaraderie or getting the best info with coaches. I always feel like the best info in our coaches meetings happen in person because it's kind of the stuff like walking into or out of a room or like while you're filling up a cup of coffee that you kind of become more friendly and stuff with these coaches that you're covering. Whereas over Zoom, you're just on their to-do list throughout the day. They're just
Hmm.
pressing a button, giving you their spiel and pressing off. So I personally don't like this model, but I do think it's better for the networks. And I think a lot of it will stick.
Yeah, 100%. So you posted a video of your dad calling the Warriors Kings game the other day from
Yep.
the basement. I thought that was really funny. Um, what does he think about this whole situation? Obviously, I'm assuming he really wants to be there, but
Well, so he's a father of four and a grandfather of two, and we're all here in Kansas City now for the first time ever. Like my husband and I have moved back. My sister from New York has moved back. So for him to not have to leave all of his
Mhm.
family here, I think is great. Now he's still traveling for CBS Sunday and Westwood One Monday. So both of his NFL games every week, he still is on the road. Uh, but for his now usually Tuesday NBA night game, um, now he's at home for that, which is awesome because he can fly home from his Monday NFL game, be home until the next Friday. And for him, that's an eternity at home. And my
Yeah.
whole life, he's been on the road almost more nights than he's home. So, and we're a very tight knit family. So, I know for all of us, we love it because the other night, I mean, we all had dinner upstairs like normal, and then he goes down in the basement and calls an NBA game. So it was bizarre. So I think he does like the lack of travel, but I'll tell you, all the technology in the world cannot make that a smooth process. Because I don't know if you watched the game. I ended up watching it separate, and there's very much a delay. And there's kind of the awkwardness of the play-by-play and the analysts kind of cutting each other off or talking over each other, and there's no sideline reporter. So God forbid a major injury happens. Plus the post-game interview, they're doing it like my dad doesn't do interviews like that, and now he's the one doing it. So it's the whole thing to me is weird. It's subpar, but it's kind of their only option to be able to go through a whole NBA season as efficiently as possible.
Hmm. And I didn't really watch the bubble last year, but did he actually physically go to the bubble?
Yeah, he
He
did.
did.
Which is crazy to think they were more aggressive with that, and then now in the regular season they're being more cautious. But I think it meant a lot for them to have home games and away games and have every team in their city. So, um, you know, in some aspects it's a step forward, but in other aspects, from a media standpoint, it's a step back because they're not there now. Some, like I saw, ESPN's going to do about half their schedule in person. So I think it's up to each network how they're going to handle it.
Hmm. And then obviously your whole family is revolved in the, revolves around the sports world. So what was it like growing up and having your dad doing all these cool different things?
I mean, it was awesome. I think it's so obvious why I got in the business, because I didn't grow up seeing a dad, get his briefcase, have his coffee, bye honey, go to work and come home for dinner. I never saw that. So I never even considered, let's say, a traditional job.
Mhm.
The idea of going to work and coming home to me every day seems ludicrous, because
Yeah.
in my head it's like you have a season, you have a football season, you have a basketball season, you have an off season. Like, I thought everyone's dad didn't have to work in the summer. I didn't realize that was just thing is just monkey see, monkey do. And I just loved watching my dad work and know how hard he worked, and know how hard it was, like, on my mom and us kids. And it's not an ideal profession for a family, but amazingly, my parents have like the strongest marriage I've ever seen. Us four kids are extremely tight with each other and our parents. So they made it work. So now, in my marriage, I'm trying to replicate all the things that my dad did. And then one day when we have kids, I want to make sure I'm also as committed to being at everything I can as well. But it's tough, and I know my dad had a lot of sacrifices.
Hmm. And then so back I think it was a couple years ago, you had the opportunity to actually be on the broadcast with your dad.
Yeah.
So what was that whole experience like? Was it kind of surreal to you?
It was, I mean, still the high of my career for sure. And I kept thinking maybe this will be a regular thing. Maybe we'll do one a year. And that was back in 2018. So it didn't happen last year. And then this year, obviously COVID, like,
Yeah.
nothing's happening. So I really hope we can do it again one day. And in fact, I have told him, and I don't know if he wants to do this, but I told him I would love to be the first father-daughters to work in Olympics. So that's kind of one of my next goals. Because on radio with Westwood One, they cover the Olympics. This year, they're not doing Tokyo, but hopefully in the next 4 years, then we can jump on that. But no, it was. I mean, it was so cool. I think the person I always want to impress the most and do the best for is my dad, because he watches, like, with such love, but he cares so much. Like, he wants me to do so well. I think he watches very nervously.
Hmm.
So to do a game together was, I mean, just so cool, because like in live time, I'm like after I would have a hit or an interview or something, and I feel like I did well, I like felt more pride than I ever have, because it was with my dad and it was for our collective goal of a great broadcast. So that was just so cool.
Hmm. And then what kind of advice did he give you when you were coming up and throughout your career that you kind of hold on to now?
I mean, it sounds so simple, but never look sideways. He's like, especially as a woman in the business, it's so easy to say, well, why'd they get that promotion and I didn't? Why'd they get that game and I didn't? And it's human nature. I don't care what industry you're in, you're always going to be competitive, kind of, in that sense, especially in a profession that requires so much of you, almost personally. You
Mhm.
know, like, just every game I cover, I put so much of myself into. You work all week on this prep, like tireless prep, and then you travel to your game, and then you're so locked in when you're there, and then game time comes, and every hit, especially for sideline, it's so short and you have such a brief moment to make an impact and to add to the broadcast. And so it's like by the time a game is done and I'm either going to the airport or going back to my hotel, like I feel so drained. So anytime you see someone else get success you're not, or vice versa, when you feel like you got something and you're like, well, God, I feel like I kind of skipped that person in line and I feel badly about that. It's it just takes such a toll. So when my dad told me, just don't look sideways, you're going to lose a lot of nights of sleep. And the good people find a way to have longevity, and just keep your head down and do your work. And I think especially for a woman to hear that was really important early on.
Hmm. Is there any advice, maybe that or something else, that you'd give to up and coming broadcasters or people, maybe students who want to get into sports media or something along those lines?
Well, I speak to a lot of university groups, men and women, and my advice is always at the college stage, do do internships obviously in the summer, but do internships while you're in school. Like that's what paid off dividends for me when I went to University of Georgia. I worked for athletic department. It was unpaid and I didn't even get credit hours. So it was all my own time, and there's no better investment I did in my career. Like I could have almost flunked out of the university and still gotten where I went, still got where I got, because I worked so hard on my own time for the athletic department, shooting practice, shooting interviews, editing interviews, cutting features, doing all this own stuff, being a one-man band, and learning the ins and outs of the business, and kind of just like making your mistakes on a small stage. So whether that's interning at a local news station in the sports department or news department, I had a news internship once, which, sports and news are not that different. In fact, sports a lot of times is news. And so to have a basic understanding of how to cover news in a more journalistic way, I think is really good. So if you're in some kind of journalism major, you'll get that in your classes, but then you've got to really cut your teeth on your own time, and don't expect anything in return, not money, not hours, because a lot of times you're just going to be free help, and that's going to be what is the best thing for you.
Hmm. And you kind of mentioned it a couple minutes ago, being a woman in the sports industry. How do you feel like, what do you feel like are the hardships of being a woman in the sports industry, and maybe how some of you guys are disrespected in a way?
That's a really good question. I honestly feel like if this were 20, 30 years ago, I would probably have a long list for you of all the ways it's hard. But I truly feel like my generation, I feel like we sit on the shoulders of giants. I feel like it was the women, like just one generation before us, who are still in the industry, so many of them, um, that faced a lot of like discrimination in the rooms. Like it's funny, even now, I was just having this conversation. There are still some older stadiums that don't have a lot of ladies restrooms. Even like you have to go into the like concourse, like where fans go to just go to the bathroom, because there's not one lower, because why would there be? There weren't women down there, near the locker rooms, near the field. Now not only is that so different, they have like pumping rooms for women who are breastfeeding and working the games, which blows my mind. Like that's so progressive. um, so not only are they more warm to the idea of women being in the building, but they're warm to being like mothers, working mothers, and making them comfortable and have everything they need. So I think that kind of says it all of where the industry views women in this space. And also, like, growing up, even though I had a dad in the business, like I never thought women couldn't be. So I never grew up and was told, oh, that's not for you, sweetheart. Like I never saw that on TV, and I never heard that in my house. So I never thought it was weird for women to cover sports. But also in football, it's different because women traditionally don't play football.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of times in basketball, women are more accepted because a lot of women play basketball and then cover it. I didn't do either. So I feel like I'm just as qualified or unqualified in football and basketball. But that being said, I'm not trying to come at it from an analyst standpoint or saying, well, when my coach did that or when I had that experience, I'm coming from it as a journalist. I cover the sport as a journalist. I know both sports in and out. I spend so much time around them and have my whole life. So I don't feel unqualified to cover them. I'm certainly unqualified to play them. So anytime anyone's like, oh, what do you know? You didn't play. It's like, well, neither did a lot of these play-by-play guys. Like my dad didn't play football, like maybe a little in high school, and then he got more into reporting, So I think women hear that sometimes from fans on Twitter of like, what do you know about gap schemes? You didn't play football. It's like, well, neither did one of the guys in the booth, and you are listening to everything he says. So I don't know, that might be the one I hear sometimes that I just think is a totally debunked myth.
So I know you got to go, but I just want to say thank you for coming on and making time in your schedule to do this. It was an honor, and I hope you and your entire family stay safe, and a Merry Christmas to you as well.
Thank you so much. No, I'm so sorry this was brief. You clearly did your research. Your questions were amazing. So I really appreciate it. I liked being on with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.